Hi everybody. So we were talking about the sensory perception, and I already mentioned that different creatures have different types of sensory ability and limitations. Human sensory functions have some limitations, and therefore we don't perceive everything around us. Many other creatures have different their own limits of sensory perceptions. Here you see few just examples how the sensory ability or function could be different from one creature to another. If you see the butterfly, there are different species of butterfly, and the butterfly has a high visual perception. That means that it can see the things ultraviolet color that we do not see. And you know that butterfly can see the flowers in many more different color than the human eyes. So how that is possible? Studies have found that in the butterfly eye, retina has uh, many more different types of photoreceptors. You know, in human, the photoreceptors are two types, right? Rods and cones. Those are two types of photoreceptors. However, in the butterfly, there are 15 different types of photoreceptors. So many more, right, than the human eye. In human, we have rods and cones, and in butterfly, there are 15. And in human retina, the cones are three different types: red, green, and blue. Those are three types of cones, color sensitive photoreceptors. But in the butterfly, they need actually four, because they need to see ultraviolet. So red, green, blue. With those three colors, we can see millions of colors. Butterfly can also do that. However, they need another type of color sensitive receptors. That is the fourth type. However, they have several more. They have like 11 more. Why they do need so many different types of photoreceptors? It is still being investigated. However, it is clear that their visual color perception or color vision is much more well developed than the human visual system. If you see another example, many snakes, they don't use their nostrils, although they have the nostrils, they use the tongue. You will see that they frequently push the tongue out and move the tongue around. Using the tongue, they smell or they get the scent of the surrounding objects, especially the scent of the prey. So they can either, sense the smell or scent of the air around them, and when the tongue touches something, also that helps them or smell the object. Okay, and if you see a dog, there are different species of dogs, and we know that dogs' hearing as well as smell or olfactory perceptions are highly developed. Their auditory function is much more developed than the human auditory. They can listen the sound 4 times farther distance than the human. So that is one thing, and they around their ear they have many different muscles, much more than the human ear. So they can move their ears to different directions to capture the sound. So all those things, are very helpful for the dogs to capture and listen the sound. And also, you know that many species of dogs, their smell perception or olfactory perception is highly developed, right? Um, you know, German Shepherd, and that's why you see at the airports, or police use the dogs to detect the things like drug, or any explosive, or any gas under the ground, or any toxic material. They often use the dogs, use their sensory functions. Okay, so much more powerful than the human hearing and smell. Also, that the birds, their brain can detect much more notes of sound. Their ability to produce many more different types of notes in the sound they produce, or the call they produce, much more than the human. And not only that, they can perceive many more notes, high frequency notes. Another good example is the bat. A bat listen, or they can communicate each other using very high frequency sound that human auditory system cannot perceive or cannot detect, right? So you see that how different creatures have different sensory ability, and that have made the um, world so diverse and beautiful as well, and help us to communicate within our own species, or within our own community. Okay, early philosophical perception, early philosophical views are very interesting and highly, relevant to the sensory perception. Many Greek philosophers, they studied the sensory perception, not scientifically but philosophically, and explained the sensory perception. They provided many theories. Some important ones we'll just talk in this lecture. One is Heraclitus, about 540 to 480 BCE. He was a very influential Greek philosopher, and he lived about a century before Plato. And he mentioned a very powerful, you know, uh, statement. You can never step into the same river twice. This is a very relevant and powerful statement regarding the sensory perception, and it is very true. Uh, Even I present the same stimulus, again and again. Every time you will perceive or listen or see that differently, not exactly same, although the stimulus was exactly same. Why just think that? Let me give you an example. This is a bell, and you just uh, made the sound from this bell. So you rang the bell here, and this is the ear of the subject who is listening. And if you can produce exactly, this is also difficult, that you present or produce exactly same stimulus every time. However, just think that this way, that you were able to produce exactly same frequency, same amplitude sound. uh, when this sound travels as waves in the air, uh, every fraction of even millisecond, the molecules, the density of molecules, or the number of molecules in the air is changing. We know that, right? It is not exactly, the number is not same from this bell to the subject here in this space. Makes sense? The molecules are changing their positions and also the numbers. So definitely the way the sound will travel is not exactly same. as well as inside your body. The environment is changing all the time, right? Hormones and other many factors are changing the sensitivity of the receptors. The receptors are in the cochlea of the ear. The sensitivity of the receptors are also changing all the time. So these things are all the time changing. That's why even if you can produce the exactly same stimulus every time, you will perceive it is slightly different. Although you may not perceive that difference, you may not detect that difference. You may think that yes, every time you heard the same sound or you saw the exactly same way, but if you can really, quantitatively measure, it is different each time. Make sense? So this is a very powerful and true statement about sensory perception. The allegory of the cave, very famous paint in Plato, a famous Greek philosopher, in his Republican number 7, section number 7, explained the allegory of the cave to explain the human perception. And it actually tells that the world we perceive is uh, solely or fully dependent on our experience. So the things we see or we perceive around us is not, true, or could vary person to person. And this allegory of cave very nicely explained that. Here you see in a cave, although it is showing only one, few prisoners were chained, and they had no idea how the outside world looks like. Okay, so imprisoned inside the caves, and they are chained, and only thing they can see the shadow of the things on the wall in front of them. Okay, on the wall of the cave. Here you see the fire outside of the cave, and the people walked this way, or any animal, or something else moving between the fire and the wall. The shadow used to fall on the wall of the cave, and that is their world. Okay, so they think that the world is like shadow. And once one prisoner, he was able to escape and got out from the cave. And when he came out, he was, very much surprised by seeing the sunlight, and he disbelieved that he didn't believe that this is the real world. There's so much light outside, and then slowly, got adjusted to that outside world um, in presence of so much light, and he saw the things around him outside of the cave, and he started to compare that world he experienced inside the cave, and then he came back or went back to the cave and told other prisoners that the outside world is like this. Now what happened, the prisoners who were inside the cave, they got mad, and they got crazy, and thought that this guy, he's lying them, he's not telling the truth, and they got very mad, because they are believe that this shadow is the real world. So whatever is happening outside um, is false, and that's how we perceive the world. The world we believe is based on our experience, and that's why different people believe different things, right? And differently. This is very much linked to a philosophical view that is very often known as nativism. We'll talk about that shortly. So I'll post a short video for you guys to see the allegory of the cave, how it is explained in relation to sensory learning and perception and belief. There is another interesting early philosophical view about perception. Greek philosopher Democritus, about 460 to 370 BCE, even 2000 years before the invention of simple microscope, he said that world is made up of atoms that collide with one another, and which has been proved later. So without seeing the atoms, he speculated that very correctly, right? So that's why the philosophical views are so powerful. They can, vision the things. They can analyze or interpret the ideas so well that they can that can be very true. Okay. He believed that sensations are caused by atoms, living object, which is true in case of some types of sensory functions. For example, smell. We know that from the food or the source of smell, the molecules float in the air, right? And then arrive inside the nose. And so this is true. His statement is true for smell or olfaction, right? Atoms leaving the object and making contact with the sense organs, nasal epithelium here, right? Uh, However, it is not true for all sensory functions, but for food, to taste the food, the molecules must come contact to the taste receptors on the tongue, right? So this is not floating or flying, but directly getting contact to the receptors. However, this statement is true for some sensory perceptions and makes a lot of sense. Although he proposed it many years before even the microscope was invented, right? Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about the nativism, the philosophical view. The founder or the philosopher who first proposed this idea is Descartes. And Descartes, he said that body and mind, they work together, and everything we perceive in this world depends on the mind. That means the soul, which still survives after the death. So body is destroyed, but the mind survives and as soul. In many religion, we also believe that, and soul is the most powerful source of all kinds of perception, and therefore the things we perceive in the world, although we think that this is the real world and the things are real, but nothing is real. That what he thinks, his idea of nativism explains, and that makes sense. He rejected the idea of another famous philosopher, Thomas hobbies who believed in uh, empiricism, which is different than nativism. I'm going to explain this in a few minutes. So, Descartes, he believed believed that soul is the main source of all kinds of knowledge and perception about the world around us. Whatever we see as real, nothing is real because everything is illusion. And illusions within illusion, that means, like, when we dream something during our sleep, since he believes that our real life, whatever we see as real, is not real, so the dream is dream within dream. I don't know if it makes sense. It is kind of difficult to explain the philosophical views. The life, the things we see or perceive as real, that is illusion, dream, and the dream we see during sleep is dream within dream. Um, Now let me explain this one, how the mind is the source of all knowledge. You know that we can create 3D on a flat surface, like on the page of a book. We create the 3D, and you can see the depth, right? Something round or spherical or cube. That is the illusion. And do you know that nowadays so many different visual illusions you can see are being created, right? So we can create. And if you show someone who doesn't know about illusion, he will definitely believe that in the Disney World, when you sit on the ride, and in 3D, that virtual um, environment, you move, you feel that it is, even it is not true, but when you do that, you feel like it is very close to true, right? And you get scared, you scream, you shout, right? Because you feel that way. However, a person who has no idea how it is created, illusions, that person will definitely believe that is true. So Descartes, he thinks that everything, whatever we see, um, is illusion. Okay, and another example, like in a glass of water, if you put a pencil or a stick inside the water, you see it gets bent here, right? So that displacement under the water, uh, which is true, you can say that this one is true or this one is true, or both are true or both are false, right? So he that's how he explained that whatever you see, whatever you perceive around you, everything is like illusion, and illusions within illusions. Makes sense? I hope it makes some sense. Um, so he rejected the idea that we learn the truth from our sensory learnings or experiences, right? When you show a ball, to a small, baby who is just learning the things, how you teach, he learns that way, right? So different culture can teach the things differently, and the learning will be different, right? So everything is depending on the learning from our experience, learning from the experience. This is empiricism, learning from experience. Okay, and therefore Thomas hopes he believes that learning is very important to realize the real world. However, uh, Descartes, he rejected that whatever you are learning from your experience, it is true that you learn from experience, but whatever you learn, that is also an illusion. It is not true. Okay, so these are two very interesting philosophical views. They oppose each other, and both of them have powerful logics, right? Okay, this is another early philosophical view about perception. Berkeley, he argued that there is no single strategy that will always tell you how distant something is. Okay, so there is no single strategy. That means we use our visual systems, our body uses multiple strategies, which is very true, right? We don't to uh, detect the things around us. We don't rely on only one cue or one, information. We receive multiple cues from the sources around us, and those multiple cues are processed extremely fast in the brain, right? And your brain quickly processes all those multiple cues and combine them to give you the perception. Okay, so for example, if you are sitting in a classroom here, you are here, and this is your instructor who is giving the lecture. So uh, you listen the sound, right? At the same time you see his face or body, and body language at the same time, right? So your ears are getting the sound, your eyes are getting the pictures, right? And your brain continuously is combining them, right? Those multiple cues, not only different modalities, but within modalities multiple cues are being processed simultaneously in the brain. For example, when you see the instructor, you see his movement, so that is one type of visual movement, is one type of cue, right? Motion. So the position of the instructor is being changed, so that is visual. Also you see the color, right? You see the distance, sometimes he's coming close, sometimes going away, so that is the depth in 3D, right? So all these things are being received and processed to give you the uh, complete idea, or much better idea about the object. So this makes sense, right? This early philosophical view that no single strategy and that will always tell you how distant something is, or how actually the object is. Instead, observer must use several visual cues that I mentioned here to perceive the distance. So for distance, you need to see the size. As you know, if you see that the size of the object is getting smaller, your brain is, processing that as the object is going away. As your eyes receive the signal that the object is getting larger, your brain reads it as object is coming closer, right? Not only that, your two eyes process the binocular disparity to give you the distance as well as the shape of the object. So all those cues are important. So only if you think about the depth that Barclay explained, you see that multiple cues are being used by the brain, right? The size of the object, the uh, disparity, binocular disparity, how your two eyes are seeing the object slightly differently, all those information are needed. By the way, based on his name, you know that the city of Berkeley in California has been named. Now, so those are a few interesting philosophical views about the sensory perceptions. In next video, I'll talk about early fundamental findings in sensory neuroscience.